اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم سبحانك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك أنت المقدم وأنت المؤخر وأنت على كل شيء قدير. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise and thanks are due to Him. And peace and blessings be upon His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He who is guided by the will of Allah, no one can misguide him, and he who is misguided, no one can guide him except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is His messenger. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last time we spoke about the ayah about taking care and keeping the prayer, even though it was in the context of speaking about talaq, divorce, breastfeeding, and the dispute, and the nafaqah, the maintenance, the expenses of life. SubhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, the prayer in the mid of these things which lead to big conflicts. Today we will be dealing with قول الله تعالى, verse 240, which is وَالَّذِينَ يُتَوَفَّوْنَ مِنْكُمْ وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا وَصِيَّةً لِأَزْوَاجِهِمْ مَتَاعًا. Now this verse, I will read it, I will read the direct interpretation or translation of the meaning, and we will try to take some quick, beautiful lessons from this. The coming ayah, it talks about what we call عدة المتوفى عنها زوجها, the time or the period that where a woman is requested to wait after the death of her husband. Here we will be educating ourselves with more than one concept. One of the concepts is, we call it in the Islamic terminology, the abrogation, which is what? Abrogation. In Arabic, an-nasakh. Now, this is number one. Number two, we will have an idea about the status, one of the indications of the status of women, and how Islam really uplifted the miserable status for women, not just for Arabs worldwide, just to have an idea, through understanding this single ayah. Let's see literally what the ayah says. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ يتوفون منكم ويذرون أزواجا وصية لأزواجهم متاعا إلى الحول غير إخراج فإن خرجن فلا جناح عليكم فيما فعلن في أنفسهن من معروف والله عزيز حكيم. Those of you, this is 240, chapter Al-Baqarah, verse 240. Those of you who die leaving widows should bequeath for them a year's maintenance without forcing them out. Which means, if someone passed away, Allah is speaking with those, the inheritance, the family, the people who will be receiving the wealth, the inheritance. Now, once this man passed away, his wife, at the beginning of Islam, the ruling was she will be asked to stay a full year in his house. Plus, the man should have already done a will, take a decision depending on her status, how to give her a specific, amount of money to take care of herself in this year. This was later replaced with another ruling, which is verse 234, which is the 4 months and 10 days plus the inheritance. When this ayah was revealed, still Allah has not given Muslims the final ruling of al-mirath, which is the inheritance, which is very specific. This is before, because in Islam, the first message of today, when Islam came, the first 13 years, it was to fix what? Aqidah, monotheism, tawheed, knowing Allah, respecting Allah, be mindful of Allah. When they migrated to Al-Madinah, they started receiving the teachings and rulings and legislations. Okay? Now, this legislation, they did not come out of a sudden like pressing a button, everything came down, yalla, apply. They came what? Gradually. Such as, we know about the khamr, we said it many times, alcohol. They were prohibited on stages. Some ulama, they call this the graduality, التدرج في الأحكام, the graduality in Islamic rulings. Some ulama, they don't use the word graduality, they use the word abrogation, nasakh. Okay? Like for example, alcohol at a certain time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them that they were asking, يسألونك عن الخمر قل إثم فيهما إثم كبير ومنافع للناس وإثمهما أكبر من نفعهما. They are asking you, O Muhammad, about the gambling and the alcohol. Let them be aware that they contain a lot of harm and some benefits. However, the level of harm and much more. So it was one of the indications of the step to telling them this is bad. But Allah was taking in consideration, and this is a message for us as well, that this is a tradition for hundreds, if not thousands of years, the people. Now it will be changed. So this is step. Next step, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَنْتُمْ سُكَارَى. Don't come to prayer if you are drunk. So technically, practically, the only time they were able to drink after Isha and before Fajr, and maybe between Fajr and Dhuhr, because there is a time, so less. Then the final one was what? فاجتنبوه. إنما الخمر والميسر والأنصاب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوه. This is a very clever, which means, and you know, the word ijtinab in Islamic Quranic terminology, it's much more than haram. Please keep this in your mind, because you know, as I can see, some of you are non-Arabs. You are not familiar with the Arabic language, because the familiar word in Arabic, which is very common, it's haram. Even we use it in haram. Even non-Arabs, they know what's the meaning of the haram. Some people, out of ignorance, sometimes they say, Allah did not say haram. Allah says, ijtanibu. What is the word haram? This literal ignorance has nothing to do with the true knowledge. That's why sometimes you need to understand what we call the connotation of the word, the indication of the word, the contexts of the Islamic terminology. Al-ijtinab in the Quranic Islamic terminology is more than haram. It's by default haram plus. It's not just haram to drink it, it's haram to buy it, to sell it, to sit with someone, or to help, or even to plant your farm and to sell it for the factory who will be using, and to use your truck for transportation of the. So all of them, they became haram because of the word what? Ijtanibuh. Now, why I mentioned the khamr now? Because it's the most well-known example about abrogation. Yes, sister.
So, for zina, it's the same thing. For zina?
No, it was not graduality, understand?
No, like stay away from zina all time.
وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا. Oh, sorry. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. Now, it's haram as well, but Allah is using ijtinab and using وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا. Now, it's by default haram, but He's not just mentioning about the action. He's prohibiting what could make you close from it. Which is, it's by default haram. It's fahisha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it's fahisha. Okay? Highest level of indecency. When it's mentioned, Allah knows. As logically we know. Is it possible that someone is just walking in the street, all of a sudden he goes and commits zina? خلاص هيك out of sudden? No, this is practically does not happen. What happens? Steps. True or false? Zina always happen through what? Steps. One of the steps, a friend. One of the steps, porno sites, video, magazine, image, listening, chatting, attending, bar, nightclub, drinking, dancing party. It's these things, it's like, a link from something to something to something, okay? It leads in many cases into final result, which is the fahisha of zina. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا. Because this will lead to that. Subhanallah. Now, this is the beauty of the Quranic terminologies, which is based in Arabic, طبعا, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a by default haram. But Allah is not just mentioning haram, because Allah knows that we will have those argumentative, wicked Muslims who will come. Sheikh, Allah said zina is haram, but did not mention anything related to the surrounding areas of the zina. Are you with me? You got my point? Allah said drinking alcohol is haram, but He did not mention anything about sitting with, selling, buying, accompanying, supporting, blah, 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 blah. That's why the divine cleverness, فَاجْتَنِبُوا وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا, which means to close any possible, way to come closer to this problem. Subhanallah. Now, I mentioned, now we are talking about the period of waiting of the widow. But why I'm mentioning khamr? I mentioned khamr just to highlight, to bring to your attention the concept of abrogation. Okay? Because this is not a familiar one. It's not familiar. Most Muslims, they don't know it. It's not familiar simply because it was in a certain period and khalas, disappeared and that's it. And the people don't know it. Most of the people, they know. What is the period of waiting of the widow in Islam? 4 months and 10 days. But 99% of Muslims, they don't know it was not the case at the beginning of Islam. What was the beginning of Islam? This ayah. 1 year. 1 year plus will. A will by the husband. Without a prescribed share of the inheritance. Before the ayah of inheritance. Later on, the final ruling, it was what? 4 months plus 10 days plus what? Prescribed inheritance. No one interferes in that. It has nothing to do with the will of the husband. It has to do, طبعا, prescribed, it depends. Is it rubu' or thumun? It is 1/8 or what? Depending on the status. Does he have male, boys, females, males and females, a father and a mother? It depends. It's an equation. People who are expert with this, they go to the court, they do this kind of calculations. But she has a prescribed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one interferes in this. Later, and the wasiyah, which was now open to the husband to say the wasiyah, the will, plus 1 year of waiting, unless if she decided to leave the home. Then it became 4 months, 10 days, plus the specific number, plus the wasiyah or the will. It became unacceptable more than third, which means plus la wasiyyata liwarith. We have new updating rulings. Yani, if you are from the direct inheritance, the person has no right to put your name in the will because your right is preserved by Allah, not by the one who owns the money. It's by default. So you have up to third of your money, you can make a will, up to third. After the third, the inheritance will become. Anyway, I know this is a very tiny technical fiqh issues, but my point, I just want you to realize the concept of abrogation. This is what I need from this ayah, because I'm not giving a fiqh lesson now, and we are not discussing this. So let's read it in light of this now. وَالَّذِينَ يَتَوَفَّوْنَ مِنْكُمْ وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا وَصِيَّةً لِأَزْوَاجِهِمْ متاعا إلى الحول غير إخراج فإن خرجنا فلا جناح عليكم فيما فعلنا في أنفسهن من معروف والله عزيز حكيم. Those of you who die leaving widows should bequeath for them a year's maintenance without forcing them out. But if they choose to leave, you are not accountable for what they reasonably decide for themselves. And Allah is Almighty, All-Wise. Now this ruling was later replaced by the ruling in قول الله تعالى وَالَّذِينَ Now this is at the beginning. Later on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the following ayah, which is وَالَّذِينَ يُتَوَفَّوْنَ مِنْكُمْ وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ 4 أشهر وعشرا فإذا بلغن أجلهن فلا جناح عليكم فيما فعلن في أنفسهن بالمعروف والله بما تعملون خبير. As for those of you who die and leave widows behind, let them observe a waiting period of 4 months and 10 days. When they have reached the end of this period, then you are not accountable for what they decide for themselves in a reasonable manner, and Allah is all aware of what you do. From this ayah, we understand that a widow, after her husband passes away, it's completely prohibited to get married unless the 4 months and 10 days are finished. After that, the idea you are not accountable, which means they have the full freedom. What does it mean accountable? Accountable means the people who are in charge of this widow, her father, okay, for example, he is asked to stop any possible marriage because that's haram. It's like the guardian. It's like when we say enforcing the law. It's like now, for example, in the Canadian law. If you want to divorce, you have to file in the courts for 1 year. They say an application to show that you want to divorce, and they allow you to divorce after 12 months with some details in that by law. So Allah is telling the widows themselves, 4 months, 10 days, you have to wait. This is called the waiting period. After that, you are free. And the inheritance. This is the idea. Now the first message, it is what? The abrogation, the nasakh. Second one, let me give you this simple, beautiful message. You know it in general, but part of my role in this message always to keep reminding you about the beauty of the constitution of humanity till the day of judgment. Now try to imagine, let's fly all together in the time machine. This ayah was revealed 1400 plus years ago. True or false? 1400 years ago. Okay? Try to imagine you are living at that time. A divine book is talking about very, very tiny details of the right of the woman, about she is allowed and not allowed. This is for her. You have no right to force them. They have to do sexual, which means in our terminology now, women's rights. Okay? طب يلا, let's go very quickly at that time what used to happen on planet Earth in Persians, Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, Arabism, Roman Empire, Persian Empire in general. Go and see, to the best of my knowledge, women in general, in all culture and religions, no right of inheritance at all. No, most of the cultures, and by the way, some of the cultures up to the last 100 years in Europe, some European countries, women, they did not have the right to have their own properties. Especially, the real estate. Do you know, up to the last 100 plus, in France and in the UK, they used to have a very restricted rules against women in specific to be a landlord or to own properties, real estate. Do you know this? Type. The right of choosing the husband. This is a good, by the way, because if you don't know the history, you know nothing. Because relatively speaking, sometimes you don't appreciate anything unless you know the context. In many cases, imagine your kid, for example, having iPhone 15 Pro Max Plus XXX, whatever, and he has no idea at all about what used to happen before that. If he is aware that you or I used, just pause, pause. I remember myself 32 years ago, not just the dining, no, forget that. Oh, okay, let's go 40 years ago. 40 years ago, I remember myself when I was 15, I think we used to wait in Jordan an average 1 to 3 years to have a landline. We need to apply, and to wait with a very strong connection. And when we received the landline with the dial, we used to make a party. Yes, you have a landline. And the landline, you know, sometimes maybe you are the only person in the whole neighborhood you have a landline sometimes. I remember myself, I'm 56 now. When I used to be 6 and 7, which means 50 years ago, 49 years ago, I remember my mother, rahimahullah, when she wants to speak with my aunt, she used to send me to one of the neighbors in the upper neighborhood. I used to leave from a place to another place, not even our streets. And you say, Assalamu alaikum. My mother says, Assalamu alaikum. And she asked me, is it possible that I can speak with her? Yes, tafadhal. She was the only landline in the whole area. Because it used to take 10, 15 years to have a landline. You know, if you don't know this, do you appreciate the iPhone 15? But balash, forget, I told you about 50 years. Let's go 32 years. 32 years, I was doing my master's degree. I went for a quick visit for 6 months into what used to be at that time, 1991, the United Soviet Social Republic, Russia. But at the time of Russia, you know, Soviet Union. I visited North Caucasia. I stayed there 6 months. I was trying to have some kind of, you know, Russian language to be able to have English, Russian, to make da'wah in case if I can. Anyway, 1991. When I wanted second most powerful country on earth with nuclear power, 32 years ago, if I wanted to speak an international call with my mom just to tell her that I'm okay, I used to go to the post office and I used to book an appointment with an average 8 to 12 days later. When my booking date comes, I wait in the post office an average 2 hours. When my turn comes, I go to a small kiosk, he does the dial, and I just open it for 5 minutes. Hello, yes, are you okay? Yes. Has anyone died, passed away? No, alhamdulillah, and that's it. 12 days to make this telephone call in Russia. 12 days. You know, okay, what's the point? People say, what's the relation between the iPhone and Russia and the you know, widows? The appreciation of what you have. I mean, it's unacceptable to speak about women's rights. Look, you know, in the West, Habib, wait. Understand the history. Understand the history. You have to understand. Otherwise, you are not seeking knowledge. You can't just say, look, no. How did they reach? What did you used to do? What does it mean if you are seeking the true knowledge? I go back 1400 years ago. You need to know. When Islam was discussing and forcing the followers of this religion, that the woman has the right of ownership, their own independent, you know, financial situation. They have the full right to inherit the full amount of money from their fathers or mothers. Husbands have no right to interfere in the money of women unless by their choice. They have the full right to accept to marry someone or to refuse. Generally speaking, most cultures, if not all, religious and non-religious, they were prohibiting women from these rights. And to give you another example, which is very common in the academia, which is religious, more related to our session now. We are talking about the Quran. We are talking about a religious constitution. The two closest religious cultures for us, basically, what we call in the academia, the heavenly religions, Judaism and Christianity. Up to when Islam came, women in general, they were facing a very difficult situation because of the belief of the original sin. You need to know that. Original sin. Type in brief, what is the original sin? Now, it is believed in Christianity and in Judaism, according to the Bible, that when Allah created Adam and Eve, Satan came, whispered to Eve to eat from the tree. She ate, and then she convinced her man, according to the Bible, to eat. Then he ate, and they fall into the sin, and we know that so they were kicked out of the paradise. Now, according to the Judeo-Christian faith, the one who's directly in charge of committing the sin which led to us being kicked out of the Jannah is a woman, our mother, Eve. So this was developed to an idea of the original sin. Original sin means every single human being has inherited this because of what Eve did. So we are born by default what? Sinful. I'm explaining to you what Christians in general believe, okay? So this is the concept of original sin. So we have inherited by default this sin. So, according to Christians in general, except a minority of them, they believe that God, to free us from this original sin, he decided to come down on a human form. Regardless of the details now, God's incarnate, God's incarnations, God's human being, God's divinely incarnate, Jesus Christ, i.e. God Almighty, okay? He came on a human form to be crucified as a redeemer, mukhallas, okay? As a savior. What's the idea? The idea, if he came down and he went through the context of suffering and then he was crucified on the cross, his blood and his crucifixion on the cross, it was the sacrifice to redeem us from the original sin. Okay? I'm not discussing how, when, why now, and what is right and what's wrong. I'm just giving you what they believe. Okay? Now, you will be a follower of Christianity if you believe that God was crucified through the incarnation and he was crucified in the cross for the sake of redeeming you from the original sin. My point now is not the crucifixion. My point is not Christianity. My point is the original sin. Now you need to know that the whole faith of Christianity as a pillar is dependable on the idea of the original sin. The original sin was done by a woman. I mean, you need to know this context. But why should I know that? Because when Islam came, to understand the context, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala easily, in few verses, فَوَسْوَسَ لَهُمَ الشَّيْطَانِ. After hundreds of years of suffering of the woman of this way, Quran made it very clear. Satan whispered to both of them, فَوَسْوَسَ لَهُمَا, dual, which means he was addressing both of them. فَأَكَلَا مِنْهَا. You know, we have singular, we have a plural, we have dual, مُثَنَّى, okay? فَأَكَلَا مِنْهَا. Both of them, they ate from the apple. It's not just this. Because of the beauty and justice of Islam, when Allah declared the final verdict of that they committed the sin, they say, وَعَصَى آدَمُ رَبَّهُ فَغَوَى. Allah attributed the ma'asiyah, the sin, just to Adam. But both of them, they listened. Both of them, they received the whispering, and both of them, they ate. But Allah attributed the ma'asiyah, the sin, just to Adam. This gives an indication for you how Hawa was freed, was completely cleansed from this accusation. It's as if, indirectly the Quran says, because you know in Islam, we believe in al-qiwama. The man is in charge of the leadership of the family, which means you are responsible. It's like the president in the democratic states. You are the president of the state. You have rights, yes, but you have as well what? Responsibilities. You are the one who declares the war against another nation, and you have specific rights. You have exemption from many things, but you are in charge. You are the first responsible person. وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلْ الْأَعْلَى. Anyway, why I'm mentioning all of this, I need to understand when we speak about chapter al-Baqarah, don't just look to the idea, okay, MashaAllah. No. When you put it in the context, you appreciate how great this religion is, as we said many times. طيب, اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد. I will read now very quickly, just read and finish inshallah the session today. There is a translation called Ma'arif al-Quran, للمفتي محمد شفيع الديوبندي. Muhammad Shafi' al-Diyobandi, Diyoband in India, it's like Al-Azhar, more or less. It's one of the greatest institutions. Darul Nadwa and Diyoband, there are places, in the subcontinent of India where great scholars they graduated. Exactly, that in our mentality as Arabs, Al-Azhar. When you say, mashallah, he's from Al-Azhar. So this, he was commenting on this ayah. In English, he said, the text now returns to the subject of divorce mentioned in verses 234 to 237. The verses that we mentioned, last two sessions. The command to take due care of all prayers put in between was to remind that the real thing in life is a constant orientation towards Allah. Because you remember, it was divorce, breastfeeding, then prayer. Then we came again to waiting period of a widow, which means all fiqh issues between of them. Be careful, be mindful of حافظوا على الصلوات والصلاة الوسطى وقوموا لله قانتين, that we did last time. Put in between was to remind that the real thing in life is a constant orientation towards Allah. Not only in the prayers where it is more pronounced, but also in social relationships such as marriage and divorce. Rather, in all areas of one's life. The message is follow rules set by Allah in your ultimate interests. It means divorce, deceased, waiting period, breastfeeding. Remember, be careful. Whatever happens, let Allah be the first in your mind. Okay? And in your mind, be mindful of Allah, which is the true taqwa and the real taqwa. And when we conclude, wherever we go, whatever we say, regardless where we are, everything in Islam revolves around what? Submission to Allah. Out of respect. That's why I keep telling you always, the name of our religion was not called after Muhammad. Like for example, Christianity was named after Jesus Christ, or Judaism was called after Judah. Judah, it is believed, Judah is one of the 12, sons of Yaqub. Okay, Judah, Yehuda. Yes, or the tribe of Judah. But for example, Judaism, it's either was named after a tribe or a person. Christianity was named after a person, at least for us, with the prophets. Buddhism was named after Buddha, whether he's a righteous person or a God's incarnation or a divinity of God. In Islam, it's not named after a person. It's for example, our religion's name is not Arabism. It's not Muhammadanism. It's what? Islam. There is something, very deep in that. Because the core point is submission to Allah. It has nothing to do with Arabs or Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is just what? A prophet. Messenger was chosen by Allah. If Allah did not choose him, he's just an ordinary person, period. Allah decided to honor him, not by his choice. And whenever Allah decides to honor someone, it's the will of Allah. Tab Sheikh, depending on what? None of your business. What? But I want to know. None of our business. But how come I need to know? It's not your right. This is the kingdom of Allah. Wallahi, very simple. The kingdom of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even Allah favored some prophets upon each other. وَتِلْكَ الرُّسُلْ فَضَّلْنَا بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْض. It's not the same. 124,000 prophets, we knew 25 of them. Yes, from the greatest, for example. Yes, some stuff. For example, the status of Muhammad ﷺ is much more higher than Yunus alayhi salam, than Dawood alayhi salam, than Yunus alayhi salam. Yes, it's by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Muhammad ﷺ, at the time of the intercession in the day of judgment, Adam alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, Nuh alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, they will be afraid to ask Allah to start the accountability. And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, the people, when they will come to me and I will do prostration, which is sujood. قال فيقال لي ارفع رأسك يا محمد وسل تعط واشفع تشفع. He said, I will do a sujood for the sake of Allah in the day of judgment. قال I will be inspired قال بمحامد لم أعرفها من قبل. Some certain phrases and wordings that I will praise Allah. It will be my first time in my life that I know them. I will be inspired to say them. Then I will be told, oh Muhammad, ارفع رأسك, raise up your head, ask, and you will be responded. By the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very simple. My point that, by the way, some Orientalists in the medievals, the terminology medievals, what does it mean? Yes, العصور الوسطى. Medievals at the time of the Middle Ages. When I talk about 500 years ago, 700 years ago, 900 years ago, it was the very high conflict between civilizations and between cultures, between East and West, between Muslims and Europeans. At that time, one of the very interesting things Orientalist European Christians used to do, in many of their writings, they used to call Muslims what? Muhammadans. They did not call us or Turk. It depends. Turks or Muhammadans. What's the indication of Muhammadans?
They know that we are followers.
We are just a follower of Muhammad, the Arab, clever, genius, liar, which is not a prophet. You got my point? Yes, there's a. By the way, we are not Muhammadans. We respect Muhammad as our prophet. We are what? Muslims, monotheistic Muslims. We believe in the oneness of Allah, and Allah is the only creator and the only one who deserves to be worshipped. And He decided to choose Muhammad as a messenger and the final and the seal. Very clear. One of the beautiful things of Islam that I read and watched and heard, and I met hundreds of reverts. One of the connecting thread between hundreds of them, would they say, why did you decide to become Muslim? Because it's very clear. Direct to the point. Black and white. Direct answers. No ambiguity. No ghumud. Okay? Nothing hidden. Nothing philosophical. Nothing behind it. No. Dear client. Direct to the point. Have you watched this black American lady just a few weeks ago at the beginning of the problem? Reagan, something? Megan Rice. Yeah, subhanallah, it's very simple. Start reading. Then say, she made like a special group and she started encouraging the people to read the Quran. He said, I was astonished. I thought introduction and philosophy, direct to the point. يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم الذي خلقكم والذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. What? Said the first time in my life I see a book and say, oh human beings, oh people, worship your Lord. Because she thought that she will find a lot of theological, philosophical arguments. Nothing. Direct. Subhanallah. By the way, we Muslims by birth, we don't appreciate this because simply we don't know it. Because we were born Muslims. So we don't know it. The one who is deprived from such a thing, while he's searching for the truth and his heart is connected with it, he appreciates or she appreciates. Let's say direct. Wallah, I did not even think it not even once in my life. Because خلاص we were born Muslim, and that's it. When she tells there is no philosophical, theological arguments, no complicated things, no philosophy, no hidden, no ambiguity, you can tell how she used to suffer. Got my point? Direct. Later, I think she became Muslim, I think. Yes? By the way, this is a simple example. Simple, humble example. Well, I met one of the sisters. She used to be my student. She's in my age or maybe elder than me, but she attended the master's degree. I taught her about 20 years ago back in Jordan. She's a white American female from Chicago. She became a Muslim about 35 years ago. She's 55 or 60 now. Anyway, she came and she to do her Islamic studies there. I mean, one of the beautiful things she was talking about, her story. I know, she's my student, okay? One of the amazing things she said about her story, she said, I started doing my degree in Christian theology to be a specialist how to convert Muslims into Christianity. Wallahi. She said about herself. Because I did not ask her permission to say her name, or otherwise I will ask you to go to contact with her to listen directly from her, but I did not take the consent from her. Anyway, she said about her directly, I heard her many times saying that in my class and in a public speeches back in Jordan. She said, I started doing my degree as a specialist how to convert Muslims. Okay? She said, subhanallah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the guidance, she said many things, but one of the things that happened with her, which is really very strange, how simple it is. She said, once I had a shower and I was putting the towel, having, the towel on my head like this, just to dry my hair. So I decided to put the towel like this to dry my hair. I was passing through the mirror. I looked like exactly the muhajjaba, coincidentally. So she put it like this. She made it like this to dry. She passing by. Immediately, the image is a copy from a Muslim and muhajjab. He said, I was shocked, but it was very nice. I liked it. I didn't know about the feelings because I'm doing my training how to convert those people. But I myself saw myself in the mirror because of the towel as if I'm a muhajjaba. It touched me. I had a strange feeling. I forget the details now because about 15 years ago. But this was one of the incidents that touched her heart about Islam. What? This was one of the things that made her to think seriously about Islam. And she is one of the great da'iyas since about she became married from Palestinian Arab Muslim. MashaAllah, her daughter and her son, maybe some of them, I think maybe he finished master's degree in Islamic studies, something like that. I'm not sure. They were about to do something like that. I forget the details now because more than 15 years ago. And MashaAllah, she's doing a great da'wah in Chicago. Anyway, the idea, look how simple it is. A piece of cloth, coincidentally drying her hair, she saw herself in the mirror as if she's a muhajjaba. She started to think about Islam. Ya Allah. I mean, how complicated is this? How philosophical, theological, academic depth in this? Nothing. Who did it? No one. Who put efforts to convince her to stop doing what she was doing? No one. Look to Andrew Tate. Because he decided to become a Muslim. Look what astonished him in Muslims. If you remember, about 5 years ago, he was saying, if I want to bid, okay, for a religion or religiosity, he himself used to be an Orthodox Christian, he himself. He said, I donate every month 20 or 30,000 for the Romanian, I think, Romanian church, Orthodox church. Said, but if I want to change my religion, then they asked him in a podcast, they say, why? They say, because Muslims are the only group, they stand for what they believe in. Look, why he was touched. They say, if you tolerate everything, you will end up stand for nothing. Said Muslims, they don't tolerate themselves, which is true, because if you tolerate everything, you will stand for nothing. You will be nothing. What is the unique in you? What distinguishes your identity? Your principles. Your principles. By the way, it's not because we are clever, because Islam does not allow us to play this game. We can't, by the way. If the religion by design has these kind of gaps, easily we could have done it. Yani, why not? But we can't. That's why we have hudud, limits. No one can change the ruling of Islam with regard to alcohol. Even let's bring now the most powerful 100 great scholars in Islam. If they agreed upon to stop talking about the prohibition of alcohol, we will throw them in the rubbish bin. They don't dare. They don't. But what if the most powerful 1,000 scholar of Muslims, they decided to say, hey, zina is not prohibited. Rubbish bin. Yalla, bshra, yalla, to the garbage. No one will listen. But 1,000, even wallahi law 1 million. إنا نحن نزلنا الذكر وإنا له لحافظون. It's we, the majestic we, who reveal the Quran, and it's we who preserve it. That's why, a person of 15 years memorizing the Quran, reciting the Quran, could have a status better than anyone if he's prestigious or clever or religious. Who doesn't care? I mean, no one can change. That's why it's preserved. Can anyone change the ruling of Islam with regard to riba? No. Zina? No. Alcohol? No. Can anyone change? No. All of these things. That's why he was said, wow. If you keep, because he was comparing many other cultures, they started tolerating, till they reached what? They lost everything. So that's why Muslims, they don't tolerate. By the way, it is because it's the system of Allah. No one of us is able to change it. If it's up to us as individuals, why not to tolerate? Why not? By the way, let's logically, if it's up to us, why not to tolerate? Why to keep facing problems? Why? Are you with me? But it's not up to us. That's why we are Muslims. This is by default your name. You have submitted yourself to the will of your Lord. Submitted. Taslim. It's not up to you, it's not up to me, it's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah decided to make this is prohibited and this is allowed. This is recommended, this is not recommended. And this is the core point of Islam. So our point now is not the widow. Our point is not the divorce. Our point is not the will. Our point to understand the power and the beauty of Islam as a divine system. Okay? Jazakumullah khair. Finito. Even though I was planning to finish in 35 minutes, but I'm sorry. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.